Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ray, and welcome to the RayWenderlich.com podcast. In this podcast, we'll keep you up to date with the latest app development tech talk. Now, here are your hosts, Dru Freeman and Nishant Shrivastava.
Thanks, Ray. This is the RayWenderlich.com podcast. Welcome to episode 7 for season 11. This episode was recorded on Saturday, the 13th of February, 2021, for release on the 3rd of March. This episode is sponsored by the Language Metapod and by the number Q. I am Dru Freeman with my Google Doc literate co-host Nishant Shrivastava.
Thanks, Dru. This time we have with us Corey Leigh who also contributed to the book Living by the Code and is the head of engineering at Kin plus Kata Create. She's also a former GD and a GDG organizer.
Corey, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It is great to have you. I don't want to sound like I say this every episode, but I really enjoyed your chapter because of all of the creativity. I was a theater and speech major, so a lot of the creativity, a lot of the comments on public speaking really resonated with me, and I'm looking forward to diving in deeper with that for you.
Yeah, definitely. That's creativity has been one of the core organizing principles of my life for the last few years, and I tend to make as much space as possible for it in my day-to-day life.
Now, you're based in London, is that correct?
Yep, I've been here for nearly 3 years now.
Are you originally from the States?
Oh yeah, definitely. So from Florida, spent some time in Tennessee, Philly, and San Francisco.
I miss Philly. I was raised in Eastern Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it has a special place in my heart for sure.
Were you in Philly or were you in the periphery?
No, South Philly, mostly. A little bit of Graduate Hospital. But yeah.
Oh yeah, South Philly is real Philly.
Yeah.
Not to say the rest of Philly isn't real Philly, but South Philly is core and the
yeah,
like.
and I was there at a really interesting time as well, because like technically Philly, the website was just starting to kick off and the tech scene was just starting to grow. This is like 2010 time, so it was really fun to grow along with the tech scene in Philly at that time.
So I guess the important question that I've been asking all season is, how are you doing with shelter and lockdown and tier 12 at this point?
Yeah, it's not my favorite time, of course. But generally I feel like I'm doing okay. I have been traveling a bunch for the last like 10, 12 years, and it's just kind of nice to nest a little bit. Obviously I'd rather be able to go outside and get married. I've had that canceled twice. So like there's some downsides for sure, but we'll get there in the end whenever they open stuff back up.
Well, besides getting married, what do you do outside when there is not lockdown? What is enjoyable to you that is not tech?
Yeah, well, I generally don't do tech stuff too much outside of work. I really like to live the rest of my life. So we mentioned creativity a bit, but I do a lot of drawing and then play with different types of media as well, like collaging and whatnot. I really like being outdoors. I haven't done as much since I moved to London, but hiking and camping, all that sort of stuff I'm really into. I like picnics. I like going to art museums. I like traveling a lot as well. I like to do a lot of different things and mix it up a bit.
So now you've done a lot of public speaking, and I'm always not pleased so much as happily surprised when I find that a public speaker admits they are not comfortable with public speaking. They have public speaking fear. We had Ty on last episode who also said it. How do you fight the fear? Is it just over preparedness, or are there other things that you're using?
Yeah, I mean, so part of it is exposure. So the more you do it, it's a little bit easier. But I was a little bit concerned about, doing this podcast because I don't usually do things that are a recorded video. So, but yeah, so what do I do? Sometimes I do power poses where I'm like really freaking out. It really is hardest when I first give that talk for the first time, if I write a brand new one, because I haven't given it yet. I've only practiced it in my head basically and out loud a few times. So that one's probably where I have the most fear. If I give that talk again, then I'm less afraid of it. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what my strategies are for getting over it. Is really just continuing to do it. And it's opened up so many opportunities as well, that there's a bit of positive feedback that helps you just keep going with it even. So there is some payoff at the end. You get the serotonin bump, right? But before that, it's all fear all the time.
Now you said power poses?
Oh yeah, so there's like, Wonder Woman and things like that in the bathroom beforehand, so you can like center yourself and get ready and feel powerful before you go on stage.
But now you'd said that initially when you started out, you'd overscript and you'd all but just read script. How have you gotten away from what techniques have you used to be a little more impromptu in nature?
Yeah, so the first keynote I gave, I felt like a lot of pressure on making sure that it was inspiring and whatever else, not just informative. And I wanted it to be like perfect.
Mhm.
So I basically wrote a 30-page paper to write that one, which is a little bit overkill, but I spent like 2 months prepping for it and, was really pedantic about slides, all that sort of stuff too. But then the second keynote I wrote about being creative, I only had 2 weeks to write it because I hadn't quite chosen my topic up front. And then I eventually chose it. And then I forced myself to go through it quickly. So it was the two opposite ends of the spectrum on that. And I actually felt like the creative technologist talk was a bit better than the Android is the world phone talk, because I wasn't so scripted with it. I was just trying to think of what inspires me and how I build my creative practice and what I had done throughout the years to make myself bring more creativity into my life. There's also like this really great video series from Google Developer something. It was a partnership with Speechless, and it's two women who are doing back and forth for improv and telling you how to basically write your scripts through just speaking. So now what I do is a mix between sketchnoting to get like the overall idea for the talk, and then I do some thumbnails. I do speak and record it and speed it up so I can hear it, and then turn that into slides. It's kind of an iterative process, but I still spend a lot of time prepping for it, but it's in a different way. And it's not like I have to have the perfect words. Now I spend more time on structuring the story and making sure that the takeaways are clear instead of what am I going to say each time a slide comes up.
I was very blessed in my first year of undergraduate to be at a college that required a year of public speaking, as a semester of public speaking as well as composition. We had a teacher who was an improv nut, and she would have quotations, and we basically had 7 minutes, 3 minutes to prepare and 4 minutes to speak on whatever quotation she picked for us that class period. And we all joked that if you got out of her class alive, so to speak, you could crack open a fortune cookie and talk about it for 7 minutes.
Yeah, I wish I had that class, because I still feel like I freeze up a bit if I don't have at least some bullet point notes to help me for something. And the whole idea of taking improv class completely terrifies me.
And you said that you use mind maps as well for this.
Yeah, a bit. So usually I do the mind map as more of the, okay, what do I want to talk about? What's the new topic for the talk?
Okay.
Sometimes I'll use it for the content itself, but usually I'll do a sketch note, which is kind of more of this is the takeaways I want the audience to have at the end of it. And then I'll go from there into slides and story and things like that.
Who did we have do sketch note earlier in the season?
I think it was Lara Martin, who also does a lot of sketchnoting. And that's a very interesting point that you brought up. I think this particular topic, or like at least sketchnoting, has picked up space in the last few years. How did you actually get into sketchnoting as a, like maybe start using it for your talks and preparing for your talks?
Yeah, so the day I started, well, basically I was at a conference with Chuki Chan, and she was sketchnoting, and I was like, what are you doing? That looks cool. So from that day, we both started sketchnoting, because she had taken a workshop just prior to that, and then that was her first time out actually practicing it. So I started on the same day. That was February 2015-ish sometime. And then at the time, I was just using it for conferences I was going to and speaking at, but then it made the jump to my work notebook, and I keep very detailed work notes about like feelings and things I'm working on, things I'm learning, that sort of stuff. And then that turned into essentially like a zine or a sketch notebook. So I got to practice constantly. There's also there's the sketch note handbook, and then there's a sketch note workbook. That one talks about using it for everything, like your travel journals and things like that. So then I started opening up where I use it. I still use it every day in my work journal. I also do it in my personal journal. I do kind of a bullet journal-y sort of thing. It ebbs and flows, but often I'll keep a bullet journal. And yeah, I just tend to use it everywhere. One of my friends says, I think in sketch notes, and that's pretty true.
That's very interesting. I think I've also seen Chuki posting something on Twitter, and she kind of does it weekly or something, which probably Lara was also following. That's how I experienced this. And I think you also have a website dedicated to this. I think it's called sketchnoting.tech.
Yep. So I started that. Yeah, I started that, I don't know, 6 months ago or so. So it's got, I'm not only doing sketch notes, that really spurred me on to getting better at drawing because I wanted to have them look better. So I've been taking an illustration course, for example, this semester. So I'm like documenting how I'm learning about illustration. And then I also have a bunch of my older sketch notes up there. So I have a micro blog for snippets. So the things that just inspire me on the day to day. And then I have a longer format, words behind things I post blog as well.
Yeah.
One of the, go ahead.
The link of this. For our listeners, we'll put the link of this sketchnoting website that you have. There's like a very good content. People should check it out.
Oh, thank you.
No, I was just going to talk about the illustration because you talked about Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards. And I was immediately taken by this because I've been trying to draw since I was a kid and I've never felt that I can draw. Can you talk about some of the method in that and how it helped you basically draw better?
Yeah, definitely. I really love that book. I've read it through 3 times. The first time I picked it up was in 2005, and I was also doing some draw along books at the time. And I don't feel like I got super far with it, but then I switched to photography and just did that for 8 years and then learned more about composition and stuff. And then I picked it back up again, like I said, when I wanted to learn about drawing when I was doing sketchnoting. So 2015 was the second time I read it through. And that one I feel like had a lot more transformative thing there. And then I did another sabbatical in 2017 and reread it then too. And the drawing has gotten even better since then. So the whole premise of the book is everybody can draw, but you've been beating yourself up since you were a child. And you have these like really strong symbols you use. So like a house will be a square with a triangle on top. It's just what you've been drawing since you were a kid. And then your left brain just takes over and does that. And it's like, cool, we drew a house. You don't need to do anything else. But the right brain is the one that really likes to go in and see all the complexity and get lost in it. And, when you're programming, it's like that flow thing that you can access. So she gives you a lot of ways to get your left brain out of the way by boring it, essentially. That'll let you dive into the more creative flow side of things. So like turning something upside down so you can see the left brain's like, what are you doing? Why is that upside down? That is so stupid. And then eventually it just shuts up. And then you're drawing upside down and the thing looks like the thing you want it to at the end.
Yeah, I believe the phrase you used was it bores your inner critic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really could use that predominantly. I mean, I haven't talked about it on the show. I suffer from mild depression, and that is the loudest inner critic that you get in your mind. It's the one that's always saying doom and gloom. And if this mechanism is a good way to basically have one side of your brain slow down the other side of your brain, that's it's quite a find there.
Yeah. I really, really value this aspect of my life now because it's like, it just helps you calm your mind. If you're feeling stressed out about something, often I'll just go draw, or especially back when I was programming, if I was stressed out about a programming problem, I would go draw a pretty diagram or something like that. And it's just like always shifting away from the thing that's stressing you out right now and approaching it in a different way. So it gives you more tools to try and approach that problem differently.
Yeah, another version of this that I actually employ, I don't do exactly sketchnoting, but it's more or less like doodling. But it's quite random. It's basically emptying your mind as much as you can and then putting it on paper. And then you're like, okay, now everything is clear. And now you go back to solving whatever problems you have. That's also is something that I've seen has worked out, at least for me.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's like a TED Talk on it, but apparently you retain 26% more content if you're doodling while you're listening to something like at a meeting or something. That doesn't even include sketchnoting. So I feel like with sketchnoting on top of it, you're probably retaining far more because I find that I don't usually have to go back to my notes too much just because it's kind of been burnt into my brain.
All those teachers that told you back then, don't doodle while you're in class, they were wrong.
They were wrong.
Yeah.
So a lot of the talks you've been doing, you started out right off by saying that you get excited by solving real world problems. And this means a lot to me because I worked in a series of tech jobs doing this app and that app. And then I got hired by a hospital. And I felt like the code I'm doing here is possibly going to save someone's life. And that made the job feel more deep to me. It made it feel more important. Can you talk a little bit about that desire to help and some of the things that you've done?
Yeah, definitely. I find that I'm a bit of an idealist as well, and I try to find something that aligns really well. I've worked with large corporations and stuff like that that didn't quite align with my long-term mission, and I found that I didn't stay too awful long at those places just because it didn't quite motivate me in the ways that I wanted to be motivated. Like, yes, I was learning things in the tech world. That was good, more depth, more exposure, whatever. That's fine. But at some point, I really wanted to do something more meaningful. One of the more meaningful jobs I had was installing solar in Tanzania. I think at some point you'll have Anise Davis on the podcast as well. And so I worked with her for a time there. But what we were doing was rewriting business apps in Android. It wasn't like the most difficult technology thing to do, but what we were doing was working offline and helping people install and maintain solar systems that were bringing power to people who hadn't had it before in really rural villages, or was giving them a bit more power during the day whenever there were power cuts and things like that. So that was a really meaningful one. And I got to travel the world quite a bit for that as well and work with people in many different time zones. I really enjoyed that. And then the place I'm working at now, Kin and Carta. So we work with a lot of different companies in a lot of different verticals, social responsibility, all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of opportunity to work on things that matter. Now I'm not really on projects anymore because I'm now the head of engineering, but now I'm focusing more on building the community at the company, which is what I used to do in the community for like Android meetups and things like that. So it's a new way to use the same skills that I've been building up for the last 10 years or so.
Now, go ahead, Nishant.
Yeah, I was saying, you mentioned that you are right now the head of engineering. So like, I'm guessing you've obviously, in considering even the past experiences from different roles that you've done, you've kind of like amassed some sort of learning that you, if you would want to like share with the listeners, that would basically help them in their career in some sort of way. That would be nice.
Okay, yeah. So if I think back on my career, at first I started out with breadth. So I did like C router code, I did Java backends, I did Ruby and Python Django, all over the map, completely different stuff. And then I found Android, and then I stayed there for 10 years. So I did the classic breadth and then depth, and then I've gone breadth again. So since I joined this company, I was a tech lead on lots of different projects, and now the head of engineering. But the things that I've found is you really want to make sure that you're always growing and finding things that are interesting to you, either from, community and, like more of a culture aspect, but often trying to grow your technical skills as well, right? So trying to mix it up and make sure you get that breadth, especially if you're looking for something more like a technical leadership position down the line. If I had only done Android the entire time, I think I would struggle a little bit more with leading engineers across the spectrum. Yeah.
Now, you are the head of engineering for a company, and I want to frame this correctly. As a woman in a high position in a company, you have probably conquered a lot of stumbling blocks along the way to get there. And you comment that you're frustrated by the slow pace that a field like technology, which changes every day, still is being very slow in this process. Can you highlight some of what you feel is some of these roadblocks that slows down women from being as successful?
Yeah, I mean, it's, so it's all over the map. So just the way that women in power are perceived, like the more powerful you get, the less likable you are. And there's lots of studies around that. And then just people tend to react more negatively if you're saying things with assertiveness. So you have to temper it a little bit. So it's everything from your day-to-day interactions to structural things that make it a lot harder. I'm quite stubborn. So I think that because I've just been like, well, you're not going to push me out, I want to be here. I continue to try new things. Anytime I get super frustrated somewhere, I'll find either a way I can change it where I am, or I'll look for something new. But what's interesting here is because I am now in a position of power, I feel more empowered to speak out so when I'm seeing things, so behind the scenes, I'm sponsoring people all the time and making sure that their names are coming up for new opportunities. I'm looking at the hiring process and things like that and challenging the places that it should be better. So it's nice that now that is actually technically my job to make it so that we can hire and maintain more diverse populations inside of our engineering org. So it's a pleasure and an honor, and I'm really enjoying it. Also making sure that the culture is welcoming and psychologically safe and doesn't push people out is super important to me as well.
Yeah, one of the comments that you made, and I always try to pull a quote out from the chapter that's not the quote they highlight. You said the only people who shouldn't speak are the ones who can't keep sexual jokes out of the talks, or the people who are working against diversity and inclusion. These people create a hostile environment. And I really, I agree with that. And I'm pleased that this show has been able to have on Chiki Khan and is on in 2 episodes. So it's working to basically say that the conversation needs to be there until the point that we don't need to have the conversation anymore.
Yep. And one thing I've been doing at my job, they haven't stopped me, so that's good. I came up with like management training because we didn't really have any internally. So mine is very anti-racist and feminist at its core. So like each module has, okay, cool, we're talking about one-on-ones. Okay, we'll talk about power structures here. And you'll understand that like people who are from disadvantaged backgrounds might be a little bit more scared and how to pull them out and make them feel comfortable. Just things like that, and like how to do better feedback, how to debias your feedback, all that sort of stuff. Slowly,
we're working through the minority letters. I mean, we're getting more openness toward LGBTQ. It's slow, and I wish it wasn't so slow, and I wish the fight back wasn't as horrible as it is, because I've been in enough toxic workplaces where I'm the one who's championing for other people, because the only reason I can do that is I can get away with it as the cis male that well, I guess at least they'll listen to me when I say, don't say that.
Yeah. I mean, even recently, like there was a sexual joke and I was like, hey, male head of engineering peer, can you go deal with this? So it's not just me calling it out. Like I'm more than happy to do it, but I wanted, to help encourage other people also to help fight back, and it worked well.
So let's go back and talk about some of the talks that you've done. Some of your talks, you say you've given 9-10 times. Can you talk about the evolution of a talk as you've done it repeatedly, and are there pros to that? Are there cons to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a balance between everybody's seen it and you want your presentation to be quite good. So I feel like the first time I give the talk is never the best version of it because I'm too nervous. I haven't quite given it before. I don't know what lines will work and what won't. And then if I watch it afterwards, then I'll be able to see, well, okay, well, that didn't quite work. I should cut that. I should expand on that. So what I tend to do is go back and revisit those talks and find the places that are more valuable and try and expand them and make it better over time. I usually like to give it about maybe 5 times. It just depends, because like if we were able to travel the world and you do like 8 conferences in a row, it sounds like maybe I'm being lazy by doing the same talk over and over again. But if you do it within a 3-month span, then it's like, okay, cool. Well, these are new people who are seeing it for the first time. And that experience of seeing it online is different than seeing it in person too. So if you only give it the one time and then they can only ever watch it on the TV, well, on the YouTube instead, after that, then there's that balance, right, between giving people the opportunity to see it live and improving it over time.
One thing that I've also noticed is that at least when people ask me that a certain talk is given multiple times, my point is that the technology is also evolving over a period of time. If it is like say tech talk, and then that makes sense because by the time say you see the last version of it, it's already been updated every single time. So that's also one thing that kind of comes up now and then for tech-based talks, I would say specifically.
Yeah, and one other aspect to that is I tend to choose talks that are a little bit more evergreen now, that aren't tied to a specific tech that may go out of fashion soon. So then, if I'm talking about creativity or I'm talking about being intentional with your time, then that gives you, tips you're going to be able to use for several years. So it doesn't really go stale. And there's always new stuff you can learn, more things to add to it over time.
Yeah, but basically that talk is, I've watched it. I would suggest others to also go and watch that talk.
Thank you.
Did you go up the ladder in the company that you are head of engineering for, or did you come into that company as head of engineering?
Yeah, this company, I was hired as a tech lead. And then while I was here, I did the management training things like that outside of the projects I was leading, and then got promoted to head of engineering.
Because one of the things you talk about is how to hit the ground running in less than 6 months when you're entering a company, how to be valuable earlier on. Can you talk about some of the tips there?
Yeah, definitely. So there's this book that I recommend, which is The First 90 Days, which is all about trying to get to that value really quickly. So the idea is you try and analyze the organization. You find the cultural historians, the people who know a lot about the company, and you get to know them, and you get to know a lot of stuff about the background for why things are the way they are. You come up with learning plans of the things you need to be effective in your company. If you set up goals, like shorter term goals, and then you build up momentum and have a virtuous cycle instead of the opposite of that, where it's like, oh, failure after failure. So it just really helps you be more intentional, thinking about, okay, cool, what do I need to do to make me effective at this job and to continue to grow?
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm assuming as head of engineering that you've done some of the interviews, or you've possibly been the person who said the yay or nay on the hires.
Yeah, often.
Are you typically on the lower end of the interview process, or are you more just the yay nay at the end?
It depends. So I have been at the pre-screening phases to see if people made sense. That was really more when I was lead, and we're about to do a hiring push soon. But it's kind of a mix. I'm either at the beginning or I'm at the end. Depends on the seniority of the person we're talking to, whether or not I was part of the official thing, or if I came in just to help them understand the culture better, give them more of a flavor of what the company's like. So I've done both of those roles.
I want to ask you a question that I came up with on the previous show, because this is sort of turning things around. One of the dreaded questions that comes up in an interview is, do you have any questions for me? And I'm curious, because this is a question that is probably something that you're going to ask. What kind of questions would you like to be asked? What are the things that you'd like to hear this person have interest in?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to find that most engaged people are asking things like, what's the culture like? How am I going to be assigned to, because we're at a consulting firm, how am I going to be assigned to projects? How am I going to grow? How can I continue to grow with the company? And just having a little bit more insight into what they value and what's interesting for them. I'm happy to take questions across the entire spectrum if they want to talk about benefits all the way through career progression.
I have a question that is coming from me, I would say, basically, because I kind of I've experienced this at a couple of companies when I work with them, or like as a freelancer or even as a full-time employee, is that the hiring department in general, or like even people at the top, they kind of start talking about that it's really hard for them to find women in tech, or like say even diversity based hires also. Is that actually something that you have experienced once you got to this point and you started hiring people?
Yeah, so controversial. I think you're being lazy if you can't find anyone because you're not looking. But yeah, so we are out there. And I'll give you a story of one of the times that Shuki Chan and I actually, we did a takeover of DroidCon New York in 2015. We decided we wanted to up the number of women speakers. We didn't tell anyone, we just started doing it. So we went in LinkedIn, we tried to find every single lady face we could that had Android attached to it. We would send Twitter DMs, we would find them on LinkedIn, send them messages there. What we did is set up a Google Doc so we could help. We were like, we'll mentor you through this whole process. We'll tell you how to do the abstracts. We'll give you feedback on it. We're also more than happy to help you build out your talks if you're accepted. So we found a few hundred actually women, and then not all of them were part of the application process for this, right? But we ended up with 20% women speakers at that particular conference because we found the people, we offered to build a community with them and help them out. And then around the same time, there was a Slack that is also ended up being the home for all of those women in Android. And I think there's like 250 known to me women in the Android world. And we have a place where we can chat, which is quite nice. So that whole research led to a long-standing community So you can build your own networks. You can go find people. The problem is people are like, oh, I just put a job out there and no women applied. Well, you can't just put a job ad out there and hope for the best. You actually have to go build relationships, and maybe someone will be, you have to maybe talk to them for 2-3 years to eventually pull them into whatever company they'll come join you for. But it's really about those relationships and building them instead of just praying and hoping for the best.
And of course, with everything closed and there not being any talks, this is really putting a damper on the real main way that people have been networking to meet other people.
Yeah, networking has been tough for me too, because I do often meet people through those conferences and meetups and things like that. And I just haven't really been reaching out. It's been more strengthening the relationships I have instead of building new ones.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a remote developer to begin with, and when this entire transition occurred, a lot of people found themselves at home on Zoom all the time, and it's interesting. In your position, are you predominantly working at an office or are you remote?
So we've been remote for the last year since the pandemic hit, but predominantly we were in the office. I usually worked one day from home a week, and then we would be at client site usually until Friday, and then everybody would be on Friday. But everybody's been remote, and that's quite difficult for building that community and making it still feel quite cohesive. You don't see people around the floor as much. So in the consulting company, they're in just their project team, so they don't see the rest of the company like they would have before. So it's really a struggle to try and build and keep that community vibe going.
So from a remote point of view with the lockdown, how do you keep yourself disciplined and remaining on track for a day?
Yeah. So what I tend to do is at the beginning of the week, I'll spend an hour or so in the morning trying to figure out what I want to accomplish for the week. So I'll come up with win themes, the high level things I want to get done. Because I know as a head of engineering, I'm often in meetings most days. So you don't get as much time to work on deeply on things sometimes. I do take Wednesdays and make sure nobody bothers me on Wednesdays so I can have some heads down time, some thinking time, or doing bigger chunks of work. But on Monday, I'll figure out what I want to accomplish over the week. I'll look at my schedule as well. And like I mentioned, I do a little bit of bullet journaling. So that often will help me keep organized throughout the week as well. And then I'm a co-head of engineering, actually. So we meet every morning to talk about our days and make sure that we are both going to be tackling the most important stuff. And then do our stuff and then come back and meet the next morning and repeat. So I just kind of always iteratively find out exactly what I want to be focusing on.
You mentioned bullet journaling. Can you give a little bit of information on that, like for our listeners, if they don't know about this?
Yeah, so the simplest version of bullet journaling is just basically doing a dot for a to-do list item and a dash for like, this is a note for the day. So you can go from just words with the dot and the dash to things that are like really pretty and fancy and hand-drawn lettering and really complicated layouts. So if you look at Pinterest, there's all sorts of different layouts you could get from there. But really, it can be just very simplistic. Here's my to-do list for the day. Here are some of the things that happen, just so you have a record of how your life is evolving, especially when every day kind of feels the same a little bit. But yeah, and to your question around how do I structure my day? So the living room is kind of my office. So it's a little difficult because this is where I spend most of my time these days. There's the bedroom, wake up, and then come here. And then I'm here all day long. Luckily, there's a second bedroom for my partner, so he's got his own space. But if we were both in the same space, that would be very, very difficult because we're both in a lot of meetings.
Now, your chapter in the book says that your process used to be that you would get up, you'd meditate and run. Are you still able to do that?
So I haven't been running as much. I have been doing like strength training on Zoom. I was doing it in the park, but it's really cold and lockdown has gotten stronger. So not doing that anymore. I haven't been as good at meditating, which I'm quite missing actually. But if I am feeling a bit more stressed, then I'll sit down and do it, but it's not part of my day-to-day as much anymore. But yeah, I'll wake up early. I'll either create or exercise, and then I'll do that before work, and then I start work.
May I ask what style of meditation you use?
It's just like the Calm app or Headspace apps, depending on whichever one I'm signed up for at the time.
Do Do you have any that you recommend?
I just like to do the dailies from both of those, really. So I'm kind of lazy. I don't really search for different content through there.
Okay, Corey. So we are going to be like changing gears a little bit and go back to the topic like related to because you have been doing a lot of like these talks and keynotes and everything. Maybe you could give us a bit of a rundown on like what is your current like existing prep process that you would recommend people to do.
Yeah, well, what I tend to do is do a little bit of mind mapping to figure out what I want to talk about. If it already is a new topic, then I'll tend to do a sketch note, which is, okay, cool. I'm just going to sit down and do whatever comes to mind and get an idea for what I want those takeaways to be. After that, I'll look at different areas that I want to expand on. And then I'll do a lot of little thumbnails. This is all usually paper drawn, like on a piece of paper, for the different types of things I want to cover in that particular talk. At some point, I'll start speaking and recording it in QuickTime, and then kind of speed it up if I can to when I listen back to see which things I liked and what I didn't like, turn those into new slides and thumbnails. And I do a bit of an iterative process like that. I don't tend to do too many bullet points or speaker notes anymore, but I used to do them quite heavily.
That's very interesting. I think initially when I was doing a bit of public speaking, I also had speaker notes, but I eventually tried to get rid of them. And now I feel more confident speaking because I don't have to focus on the speaker notes anymore. So that's something that's very interesting for me that, oh, other people are also doing this. That's nice.
I also got rid of the speaker notes myself, but that was predominantly because I had no choice. My vision got to the point where I couldn't actually switch between seeing the audience, the slides, and my notes at the same time. So I was like, well, I'm going to have to get rid of the notes and just continue from there. Of course, sometimes I take the glasses off and then I can't see anything and I just sort of go blind. And then I find out that I've gone 7 minutes over.
I guess a common question that people have, and I've heard this from like people, those who are also starting up in public speaking, and even like say, for example, those who are seasoned speakers, something that people have asked is that they are doing these conference talks. It could be tech, it could be non-tech, but one thing that maybe you could comment on, maybe give us some more idea on is that how do you go from being a normal like a conference talk person to like actually getting highlighted as a keynote speaker, which I guess has a different dynamics and also probably has something extra to be done.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure like what had switched for me, but I'll try and deconstruct it. So I did decide that I want to do a keynote like that year. I was like, I'm going to do a keynote. So then what I did was I sent keynote : Android is the world phone with a little bit of abstract underneath it. So that was kind of my bold move there. I was like, I am proposing a keynote instead of being asked for one. So that led to them actually asking me to do it, which was cool. But I don't know if that's going to work for everyone as the way to then jump from regular conference talks to keynotes. But I think one of the most important things about a keynote is it's a bit more broadly applicable. So it's not going to necessarily be a deep dive on a particular technology. Like we talked about earlier, I mean, technology moves at a really rapid pace. So things are going to change a lot. It's going to be a lot harder to do a keynote specifically on like a deep dive on a specific library or whatever. But if it is more meta skills, talking about creativity, talking about intentionality, things like that, those are the ones I've been chatting about. That tends to have a broader appeal to the audience. And if you're looking at more general tech conferences instead of something like an Android conference, you're going to have to be even more meta and zoomed out whenever you're choosing those topics to make sure that it appeals to a wide audience.
So more generalized version of talks are the ones that should be submitted for keynotes if people actually want to apply for that.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, so at the Android talks, there's sometimes history of Android, and those can be quite interesting, right? And those are a bit more general too. So it's not super deep on a particular technology. Yeah, I mean, that's just a hand wavy rule, but yeah, meta topics seem to do a little bit better and have a bit more of a broad appeal, I think.
Hopefully everyone gets this and applies for keynotes. That would be nice to see. We actually, so this is something that I experienced is that we don't actually have these meta talks as much. I know Joe, who was also on the show, he has given some talks that are, he's been in the Android conference, but he's not talking about Android. He's talking about meta stuff and also like something very that appeals to the wider audience. And that's something that we would probably want to see more. So I hope people, those who are listening to this podcast, they start applying for those. This is something that I would also want to see, and hopefully we have more of these.
Yeah, it's nice seeing more. I don't like the term soft skills, but like core skills, like, people skills sort of talks that help people think about things in a different way.
I was just about to ask about that. I remember you saying in the chapter that you don't like soft skills as a name, but then again, you've talked so much about mixing the creativity with the technical, and talking a little bit about how art and tech are slowly merging. Can you talk a little bit more about, from the point of view of being the storyteller as opposed to the lecturer?
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm a great storyteller in general. That's one of those skills I'm trying to build up right now. But yeah, so what's interesting about technology and creativity is if you think about how an artist worked and how a software engineer worked, there's a lot of overlap there because you're taking things to an abstract level. You're iterating, so it's a bit agile. You don't just like draw the thing and it's done. Like the masterpieces we've seen, they take years sometimes to create. So there's a ton of preparatory sketches. There's a ton of thought that go into it, and it's an iterative process that gets to that final masterpiece. Same sort of thing in software engineering. Yeah. I lost my train of thought.
That's fine. That happens all the time here. Now, do you still have any chance to do any academia? Have you had any chance to do anything like a creative writing class?
So right now I'm taking an illustration class this semester. So it's interesting because we're going through a bunch of different types of illustration. So the first class was reportage, where you essentially are a reporter going and drawing what's happening at a particular location. Then we did book covers, and now we're doing inner book illustrations. So this class is going to go through April. So it's really interesting to see, the types of work that people do. And then we get the same assignment, but everybody does something completely differently. And it's really nice to see everybody's styles emerge. And that's one of those things I'm still trying to find is like my style. I feel like I'm good at copying other people's stuff, and my sketch notes feel very cohesive, and you can see them and you're like, okay, that's a Corey sketch note. But in my drawing style is all over the map because I copy a bunch of other people's stuff. So I'm still trying to find what is it that makes me me.
My wife's an artist, and she takes body forms from photographs that she sees. So she'll see a photograph of some models or some dancers, and then she'll use that shape to then take to be the base of her art.
That's cool.
So, I mean, I always say once you've decided to take it for yourself and use it to make something new, it's becoming yours, even though there's probably like 80 or 20 voices right now. 80 or 20? That made no sense. But yeah, I suggest the creative writing class because that breaks down the concepts of storytelling into its acts, its beats, its directives, and that helps. Other than that, storytelling is just one of those things that I find best if you can tell someone a history, tell somebody something that you know about yourself, but just try to add little bits more and more detail or the like, and that helps with that. I come from a theater background, so that's where all of my base comes from there.
Yeah, I feel like I'm not a great like pontificator and like, or someone who adds a bunch of detail to stuff. I'm just an economy of words. I'll like tell you the thing. And that's where I feel like I need to build out the skills and adding more descriptive words and poetic turns of phrases and just details and making it feel more concrete.
Anecdotes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but it's a double-edged sword because I'm pretty sure there are people who like, shut up, Dru. We'd like to hear the person you're actually interviewing today.
We are talking about creative processes, but like let's say for people those who actually want to include these in their lifestyle, is there something that you would recommend or suggest that they should start doing? Because I believe from the way that you explained, you kind of figured out that you wanted to do illustrations and maybe started with sketchnoting and then illustrations. But like for someone who has not done either of these, how do they jump into building something in their life that's more creative?
Yeah, I mean, I think once you've made the decision, you have to make the time as well to do it. Know that it is something that you're going to have to practice if you want to get good at it. Allow yourself to suck. If you're not good at it, that doesn't mean you're never going to learn it. You should still try it, and you might learn something from that particular process. I'd also say experiment a lot. So I do collage quite a bit. I do drawing. I also sometimes do like musical composition-y things. So I'm playing with a lot of different mediums. So don't just feel like you can only do pencil drawings. I don't know, play with watercolor, play with oil painting, just buy stuff and have fun is basically how I've been exploring it. And now there's an art box I get every quarter that just gives me a lot of supplies all at once, and this really detailed booklet for, oh, this is what you're going to do with these supplies. And I found that to be quite interesting and helped me going through the lockdown.
Must be happy that my wife does not listen to this podcast herself, because she is an artist, and if she knew there was a monthly art box, I would be doomed.
Well, they are quite not that expensive, so you might be fine.
I think especially in these times, people should be definitely getting the art boxes at their home. Just trying these out.
It's not the expense. As I like to describe it, my wife has gotten all of her art supplies into one small box. Unfortunately, the one small box is called our house.
Yeah, makes sense. Because I now have bought some other additional storage to keep all of my arts and crafts supplies. So I've got something right here, a thing here, a thing here, a bunch in the other room. Yeah.
It's when you pass a storage stop and get excited. Yes. Oh, look, they have boxes. I can use those. So let's talk about you talked about, things don't have to go well. You can always fail or make things not work. I'm fond of Adam Savage's failure is always an option from Mythbusters. But you talk about the one job that you were released from, and you responded to, you described it as a no-win situation. How would you say that it was a no-win situation? That's a very strong phrase.
Yeah, in this particular job, the right answer was protecting my team, and I knew that that would be the not political answer, and then that would lead to me being pushed out. So I chose to do the right thing, even though I knew where that path would end.
And how did this affect you as a learning experience to be able to step away from that and say, I did the right, my morals and scruples were what was important to me. How did that affect you?
Yeah, actually, I felt good about the decisions I made, so that was fine. And then I took a sabbatical, and I actually ended up founding my own business for the first time. And then I started doing training of people in Android. I was went to give some talks, obviously, because I was doing a lot of talks at the time, but also went to volunteer in Mexico and install computer labs for 3 weeks. So it really gave me a lot more freedom to explore the things I actually wanted to do. So it ended up being a blessing in disguise in that case. And it pushed me to, get over the fear, because I had wanted to try and start my own business, but I hadn't done it before. And I was like, oh, well, might as well try it now, see what happens.
When things aren't going crazy with the lockdown and everything, and you're giving all of the talks, and you're the lead engineer, the managing engineer for a company, how do you keep up?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was burning myself out a little bit back in the day. I've started part of the shift to doing keynotes was like, okay, well, I'm not going to just do constant talks in lots of different topics all over the place. So I was trying to limit it to mostly keynotes and a few other types of talks. And then I cut back on my community involvement. Like I started the Android group in Philadelphia, but there's some strong leaders that we built up over the years, and they're still leading it now. So it's like just trying to find those things that I could step away from and carve out more time to myself, because I found that most of my time was invested in that, and there wasn't as much time for the creativity. So I restored balance a bit. I have it's kind of crass, but it's like, is this a fuck yes? If it's not, then it's a no. So I tend to like look for the things that really excite me now, instead of like, ooh, that sounds really fun. Because lots of things sound really fun. And they're all great opportunities, but then I don't have any time to myself. So it's been a slow process of slowing down a speeding train. I think I've gotten good at it now, though.
I think I'm on the other spectrum there, because like I'm always looking at this, everything is shiny and there's like this thing to do. But yeah, it's a good learning, I would say. I'll take away from this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate the, albeit crass way that you put it. I'm now the parent of a teenager and a lead architect for a company, and it really becomes a question of what do I have the energy for?
Mm.
What is necessary? What is unnecessary? But what is not necessarily necessary, but still something that needs to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to kind of figure those things out. Well, there are some things that you have to do, and there's some things you should do, and then trying to figure out what those are. I found bullet journaling actually quite helpful for that, because then I could make a big list of things that would be nice to do one day. And then I feel like, okay, cool. Well, I've recorded that. I've decided not to do them right now. But when I want to, I've got a list. I can go look at my backlog. I never will, but it's recorded somewhere.
Wow,
That's all she needs to have.
there's almost a keynote in the art of intentionality there.
Yeah, yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, I've been using, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Notion, but I've been using that a lot recently. They have databases and stuff. So that's been quite good for my digital bullet journaling and to-do list item tracking.
Can you talk a little bit about Notion for people who don't know what it is?
Yeah, so Notion is basically a wiki. So you can use Markdown. It's got emoji everywhere. It's just a nicer to use wiki, essentially, with you can use like the pound for doing H1s and 2 pounds for heading level 2 or whatever. So it just helps you like really quickly go through and format a document, and it's just a more pleasant place to dump a bunch of information.
Okay, so we're going to go back to the last topic that maybe we brought up, but this is very specific for people, those who are listening, and it would be important for them, is that what's your top tips for increasing diversity and retaining diverse talent? Like, what should people keep in mind?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I try to do is give really good feedback to everyone, but also to diverse talent, to make sure that they are getting better in the ways, because like a lot of feedback is wishy-washy, hand-wavy, high level. It doesn't give them anything to actually work with. But the more critical stuff, I tend to tell them that to their face and directly to them. All the positive stuff, I'm sending emails to their boss and make sure to talk them up behind the scenes. So I do a lot of sponsorship. I make sure that people are being seen and recognized for the value that they're bringing. Because now I'm in a lot more of the leadership rooms. I get to be like, oh, well, what have we been doing with this person here or that one? What's the next opportunity we can help build them up?
One of the things that you commented, and this sort of goes hand in hand with retaining diversity, is psychological safety.
Mm.
Can you talk about a little bit about psychological safety and how you try to embrace it or create it?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those elusive, tricky things, but what it feels like is you're able to speak up and you're not worried about getting fired or losing opportunities for speaking up. And you're actually valued for the points of view that you're bringing to the table, which might be different than the dominant point of view that's around. As far as building it, it's really just helping people have that space and then thanking them for it, either publicly where it makes sense or sending them messages afterwards, be like, oh, I really appreciated your candor there, and thank you for being so open and honest, especially if these are people that tend to, in the past anyway, not be listened to or be pushed out for those opinions. So like helping to encourage them to continue to give that point of view is really helpful. At our particular company, we actually quite often seek out feedback and try, and everybody is just like, I want to hear the feedback, I want to get better, and there's always this growth mindset behind it. So when you have a place that's based on curiosity over fear, it's just a little bit easier to have that psychological safety, and people feel more engaged and they want to get better and they want to hear potentially that critical feedback so that they can help themselves move forward.
Wonderful. Corey, you commented that between the position you went in for a sabbatical. Can you talk a bit about what is a sabbatical for you and what some of the ones you've done are?
Yeah, definitely. So the first sabbatical I did because sadly my father died and I was quite close to him. And then, it was quite a big impact. So for a few days in a row, I was like, I want to quit my job. And then just kept questioning, okay, is that the right thing to do? Eventually I decided, yes, in fact, I have enough savings, I want to do this. So I quit and took a year off. And this is also where I started my own business. I went to South America and traveled for the first time alone by myself, which was really cool because I had never been more than 100 miles away from someone I knew before that. So it was like one of those really empowering things. I went to learn Spanish and spent 6 weeks traveling around. So that was my first sabbatical. Also did a lot of creativity and things around that. And then it didn't just never work. I did create some Android training and then train people in that. So it was kind of a more exploratory time. And then I went back for a job for a bit, and then took another sabbatical where I did more conference speaking throughout the world, going to art museums and drawing all day long. I just find it's really nice to be able to reset, especially if you're nearing burnout, to take that time to focus either on creativity or something else that is really meaningful to you, so you can recharge your batteries and get excited about tech again.
And I know that's a difficult prospect right now with the way the lockdown is going. There isn't really that ability to forage out. A lot of people are trying to hold tight, but we expect some return to normalcy at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to happen at some point. I mean, with no modern technology in 1918 or whatever, they eventually got back to normal 3 years later. So that's I'm assuming 3. And if it's more quicker than that, great.
We all hope for the best.
Yeah.
I noticed in the book that your chapter actually had an illustration, and it was just like really interesting to dive into and to read all the different parts of the illustration.
Is that the one with I think it's Kotlin and Java, right? Where it's got a map of the world?
Traveling across Asia.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That was at a Android conference. Yeah, they were talking about how they moved from Java to Kotlin in their Android application.
So I'm curious, you've given speeches everywhere. Can you tell me some of the places that you've gone and gotten a chance to speak and travel to?
Yeah, I have gone to a lot of places. So the first international one was in Tunis, in Tunisia, and that was really cool. It was the first time they had hosted that one. So the founders of DroidCon had come down to help establish it. So I got to meet the founders of the Global DroidCon because I went to a random conference that I had applied to a few weeks prior. And where else have I gone? Berlin was really cool. I enjoyed speaking DroidCon Berlin. I've gone to, off the top of my head, it's hard to remember, but I've been to like Amsterdam and London and Paris, a few places in the States. Spoken in Russia at Mobius Conf like 2 years ago. So that was cool. Or was that last year? No, 2 years ago. Yeah.
You have a nice full passport.
I do. Yeah. It's kind of annoying for visa applications, but yes.
Do you have to visa? If you're speaking at a conference, do you have to have a visa to speak at it?
Most of them, no, but for Brazil, I did need one.
I have not done as much international traveling as I would like to. I was in Europe when I was in high school for an exchange student. I've been around Canada and Mexico a bit, but I really would love to just start talking more on the circuit. I found that my first talk at a tech conference was just very fulfilling.
Yeah, I like it because you might not know this, but I'm a little bit more on the shy side. Like once I know a set of people, then I'm really outgoing, but before I know you, I'm pretty reserved. So what's nice about giving a talk is everyone comes up to you afterwards and meets you, especially if you do like a keynote at the beginning, because then everybody knows who you are. And it's like, oh, hi, you don't have to actually go actively seek people and awkwardly join groups. They just come to you, which can be exhausting if you don't get any space. But, it's nice that, people come seek you out afterwards to talk about your topics.
I consider myself somewhat of an ambivert, sort of the extrovert trapped in an introvert's body or vice versa. But doing the podcast, and Nishant will discover this as well, when we have the RW DevCons, a lot of Ray's tutorial users listen to the podcast. And the number of people who come up to you, it's astounding that people will know you. They feel they know you because they've gotten to hear your inner mind and your inner workings. And it's just, do you get that feeling of, people feel like they know you better than you know them?
Yeah, it's kind of awkward sometimes because people will be like, "Oh yeah, I follow you on Twitter." It's like, yeah, but I just say random stuff on Twitter all the time. I don't know exactly what you're talking about right now, but yeah, I probably did that last week. I don't remember, but yeah, and then I don't want people to feel bad when we interact either. So like, if I don't know who they are, I'm still workshopping the right response of, like, how do you respond? Well, I don't know you, but that's cool that you follow me, but without sounding pretentious, because I don't feel like, ooh, I'm a star. So it's like, but I actually don't know them. So it's.
I really don't want the little Twitter check mark next to my name. I'm not that class of people.
Yeah.
I've had funny situations where, so I have a unique username, which is like unique across all my profiles. So when people come up to me, they don't refer to me by my name. They're like, "Oh, I know you because you are that unique username." And I'm like, "Yeah, but there's a name on it." Like, that's how I start my conversation. I'm like, "Oh, so here I am, I'm Nishant," and then we start talking about it. But
because I have one cola bug that I don't use on Twitter. I did briefly, but somebody is now squatting on it. But it's like my actual name on Twitter, but in other places it's cola bug. So some people do still use that. It's kind of weird when they're like, "Hi, cola bug." It's like, cool, yeah, Corey, yeah, like you were saying.
It's funny, I would say, when that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been able to find unique spellings for usernames so that I can basically take them across social media. But yeah, it does have that problem that people will identify you by however that's written. Though I've never thought of calling Nishant Nis Rules.
You should see how many people do that to me. I'm constantly correcting them. That's my full name.
Corey, this has been a wonderful walk down a technical and non-technical adventure. We've been able to talk about all of the advantages in public speaking, and it's just been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great to talk about creativity and diversity and all that sort of stuff that I'm really passionate about.
Next episode, we're going to have Fernando Quejas on the show. He's a software engineer and a developer advocate. He's a huge fan of tech in general. And as mentioned in 2 episodes, we're going to have Anise Davis on. And we want your questions for Anise. If you do have any questions, please email us at podcast@drewenderlich.com. But in the meantime, you can reach Corey at Corey_Latislaw.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be in the show notes if you want to make sure you get the spelling right. Corey, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Nishant is Nis Rules everywhere, NISRULZ. I am Podcast Dru, PODCASTDRU. You can find us on Twitter sometimes.
Yeah.
Please be our friends. In the meantime, we're going to head back to the Emerald Castle. Ray, back to you.
And that's a wrap. Thanks again, everybody, for listening to the whetted.com podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to leave a rating on iTunes. See you next time.